I'm Margaret Sterling. I'm 68 years old, and I've learned that blood isn't thicker than water. It's just stickier, messier, and harder to wash off. I spent 45 years building a hidden empire worth over $50 million, sacrificing luxuries to teach my family the value of hard work. In exchange, on the day I buried my husband, my son threw my clothes onto the lawn and pointed to a rotting wooden shed. "Sleep there," he told me. They looked at me and saw a senile, broken seamstress who had outlived her usefulness. They didn't know I was the one signing their paychecks for the last 20 years. They didn't know I held the keys to the kingdom they thought they inherited. By tomorrow morning, they will be destitute, sleeping in a motel room that smells of bleach and regret, and I will be the one holding the deed to their entire existence. The scent of white lilies in the Seattle chapel was suffocating. It was a thick, cloying sweetness that stuck to the back of my throat, masking the smell of damp wool and insincerity. I stood by the mahogany casket, my hand resting on the cold, polished wood. Robert, my partner, my anchor. 45 years of shared coffee, of silent understandings, of building a life brick by brick. Now he was gone, and the silence he left behind was deafening. I didn't need to turn around to know they were there. I could feel their impatience radiating like heat from pavement. Brian, my son, and Michelle, his wife. They weren't mourning. They were waiting. I turned slowly. Brian stood 10 feet away, checking his reflection in the screen of his phone. He was wearing a black suit that cost more than my first car, and his eyes were dry, sharp, and calculating. Michelle stood beside him, shifting her weight from one designer heel to the other, checking her watch. "Mom," Brian said. The word sounded foreign in his mouth, like a tool he was testing for weight. "Are we almost done here? The reception at the estate starts in an hour. The caterers charge overtime. Your father isn't even in the ground." "Brian," I said, my voice raspy. I wasn't acting. The grief was a physical weight in my chest. "He's at peace, Margaret," Michelle said, stepping forward and placing a manicured hand on my shoulder. She didn't squeeze. It was a gesture of ownership, not comfort. "We need to be practical. Robert would want us to handle the logistics." Logistics, that's what they called it. The carving up of a life. The ride back to the family estate on Mercer Island was silent. I stared out the window of their leased Mercedes, watching the evergreens blur past. They whispered to each other in the front seat. Rapid-fire hisses about lawyers, filings, and time. They thought I was deaf or too lost in my sorrow to hear. "The lawyer said the filing happens Tuesday," Michelle whispered. "Tuesday is too late. I want access to the accounts by Monday morning," Brian hissed back. "I have the renovation team coming for estimates on Wednesday. We need to gut that old kitchen." We pulled into the driveway of the estate. It was a sprawling craftsman-style mansion Robert and I had bought 30 years ago, but kept simple. Brian didn't wait for the car to stop completely before he was out the door. "I'll check the study," he announced, his footsteps heavy on the pavement. "Michelle, get her things," I asked, stepping out of the car. The Seattle drizzle was cold, unforgiving. "Brian, what are you talking about?" He stopped at the front door and turned. The mask of the grieving son dropped completely. Underneath was a predator who had smelled blood. "The charade is over, Mom," he said, his voice cold. "Father is gone. The house is mine. The money is mine. You've been mooching off his family fortune for 40 years. It stops today." "Brian, this is our home," I stammered, leaning against the car. "I designed the West Wing myself, and you were paid for it with a roof over your head," he snapped. "Go inside. Get your bag. You're leaving." I followed them inside. The house felt different without Robert. It felt hostile. Brian tore through the hallway into the study. I heard the sound of drawers being ripped open, papers flying. "Where is it?" he screamed from the other room. "Where is the will? The real one?" I walked into the study. Michelle was standing by the safe, holding a thick envelope. She looked pale. "Brian," Michelle said, "I found this." He snatched it from her. Finally, he ripped the wax seal. His eyes scanned the document, his lips moving silently. Then his face twisted. It wasn't disappointment. It was rage. "What is this?" he shrieked. He threw the paper at me. It fluttered to the floor. $50,000, $50,000, and the suburban house in Spokane. Is this a joke? "It's what your father wanted," I said softly. "He wanted you to have a fresh start, a simple life. Simple." He lunged at me, his face inches from mine. I could smell his expensive cologne and his rot. "I don't want simple. I want the 45 million. I know about the Swiss accounts. I know about the bonds. Where did you hide it, you old thief? I don't know what you're talking about, I lied. My heart was hammering, but my face was a mask of confusion. Your father managed the finances. I was just a seamstress. You're a liar. He grabbed a porcelain vase from the desk, one Robert loved, and hurled it against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 blue shards. Get out. Get out of my house. Brian, please, I pleaded, backing away. I have nowhere to go. Not my problem. He turned to Michelle. Throw her trash on the lawn. Michelle hesitated for a second, looking at me. Then she looked at her husband's fury. She chose her side. She went upstairs. 5 minutes later, I stood on the front lawn. My old canvas duffel bag landed with a thud next to me. Then came my dresses, my cardigans, my sewing kit. Brian stood on the balcony, looking down like a king addressing a peasant. You lived like a queen on my father's dime, he shouted. The neighbors were coming out now. Mr. Harrison, the stern-faced widower next door, was watching from his porch. The landscapers stopped their mowers. Now you can live like you deserve, Brian screamed. He pointed a finger to the far corner of the yard, under the old oak tree. There, that's about your speed. I looked. It was the old garden shed I had built for storing supplies. It was weather-beaten, rotting, and full of spiders. Sleep there, he laughed, a high, cruel sound. Sleep in the shed, old woman, or get off my property before I call the police for trespassing. I looked at him. I looked at Michelle, who was standing behind him smirking. I looked at the neighbors. The humiliation was total. It burned my skin. But then a strange calm washed over me. This was it. The line in the sand. Robert had predicted this. He had warned me. And now the test was complete. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I bent down, picked up my dusty canvas bag, and slung it over my shoulder. I looked up at the balcony one last time. Goodbye, Brian, I said quietly. I turned my back on the house I had designed, on the son I had raised, and I started walking down the long driveway. I didn't look back. The iron gates of the estate clicked shut behind me. The sound was final, like the closing of a vault. I walked 1 block, turning the corner onto the main boulevard. Out of sight of the house, I stopped. I set the bag down. I took a deep breath, exhaling the scent of lilies and betrayal. I checked my watch up at Tec Felipe, a gift from Robert, which I had kept hidden in my pocket during the funeral. 2:15 p.m., right on schedule. A black Lincoln Navigator with tinted windows pulled up to the curb silently. It wasn't a taxi. It was an armored transport. The back door opened. Patricia Hudson sat inside. She was 65, wearing a suit that cost more than Brian's entire wardrobe. She was my lawyer, my confidant, and the only other person who knew the truth. Mrs. Sterling, Patricia said, her voice gravelly and serious. She looked at my dusty bag. Did it go as predicted? I climbed in. The air conditioning was cold, crisp, cleansing. I settled into the leather seat. The confused old seamstress posture vanished. I straightened my spine. My eyes cleared. Worse, I said, my voice dropping, losing the tremor I had faked for the last 2 hours. He told me to sleep in the garden shed. Patricia, he threw my clothes on the lawn and told me to sleep in that rotting box. Patricia's jaw tightened. She tapped on the glass partition, and the driver pulled away smoothly. The shed. She has no floor to her cruelty, does she? None, I said. Is everything in place? Patricia opened a leather portfolio and handed me a tablet. The Sterling Trust is fully activated as of 9 a.m. this morning. Every asset, the Mercer Island estate, the Cannon Beach house, the securities of the offshore holdings, was transferred under your sole trusteeship. The will he found is a legally valid document from 2010, but it governs an estate that is now effectively empty. I looked at the screen. The numbers were staggering. $50 million, liquid and secure, and on the other side of the ledger, the liabilities, Brian and Michelle, and the leverage. I asked. We have total control, Patricia said. I've prepared the kill switch protocol. We can sever their financial lifelines remotely. They are currently celebrating in a house they don't own, spending money they don't have. I looked out the window as we merged onto I-5, heading south toward Portland. The coastline flashed by. He called me a thief, I murmured. He said I mooched off his father. He's projecting, Patricia said. He's about to find out what a real thief looks like. What do you want to do, Margaret? I thought about the shed. I thought about the way Michelle smirked. Initiate the protocol, I said coldly. I want them to feel it, not all at once, layer by layer. I want to peel their lives away until they're naked. We arrived in downtown Portland an hour later. The car descended into a private underground Garage beneath the Pearl District Tower. We took the private elevator to the 42nd floor of the penthouse. This was my secret. Robert and I had bought this place 5 years ago as a retreat, a place to escape the suffocating expectations of our social circle. Brian didn't know it existed. The doors opened into a sprawling living room with floor-to-ceiling glass. The city of roses was spread out below us, a grid of bridges and ambition. I walked to the bar and poured 2 fingers of scotch. No ice. I handed one to Patricia. To Robert, I said. To Robert, Patricia echoed. We sat at the glass conference table. Patricia spread out the files. Let's review the battlefield. She slid a dossier across the table, titled, The Sterling Lifestyle. It's worse than we thought, Margaret, Patricia said. I ran the full audit this morning. Brian and Michelle aren't just living well, they're burning cash like they're stoking a furnace. I opened the file. My eyes widened. Rent for the Belltown penthouse, $32,000 a month. I read, liaison to Tesla Model X's, $3,800 a month. Country club dues, $6,000 a quarter. Credit card debt. They don't have debt, Patricia corrected. Look closer. The discretionary account. I looked. It was an account Robert had set up. It auto-paid every single bill, the rent, the cars, the dinners. He was paying for everything, I whispered. He was terrified they would fail, so he cushioned every fall. They think they're successful, Patricia said. Brian walks around like a CEO, but he's a regional sales manager for a tech startup. His salary barely covers his tailored suits. They have absolutely no concept of what things cost because they've never actually paid for them. I stood up and walked to the window. I watched the traffic crawling on the 405. They think they're independent, I said. They think I was the burden. They are parasites who think they are the host, Patricia noted. Cut the cords, I said, turning back to her. Patricia pulled out her laptop. Which ones? All of them, I commanded. Cancel the lease guarantees on the Belltown penthouse. Revoke the authorization on the Teslas. Freeze the discretionary account. And the black card, the one Michelle carries, like a royal scepter, the Centurion. Patricia nodded. Kill it, I said. I want it to turn into a piece of scrap metal in her hand. Patricia typed a command. She hit enter. Done, she said. The notifications will start hitting the vendors in minutes, the banks, the landlords, the leasing agents. It's all automated. I took a sip of scotch. It burned, but it felt good. What about the cash search? Patricia asked. They'll be looking for the millions they think you hid. Let them look, I said. Let them tear that Seattle house apart. They'll find nothing but dust. 80 miles north, in the Seattle study, the air was thick with panic. Michelle was sweating. She had torn the bookshelves apart. She had ripped up the carpet in the corner where the safe sat. It has to be here, Brian screamed from the hallway. He was throwing clothes out of the master bedroom closet. Dad said there was 45 million. He said it was liquid. I can't find any account numbers. Brian, Michelle shouted back, just the household checking account. It has $4,000 in it. 4,000. That won't even cover the caterers for the reception. Brian stormed into the room. His hair was messy, his eyes wild. Call the Swiss bank. The number is in his old address book. I saw it once. Michelle fumbled for her phone. Her hands were shaking. She found the old leather address book in the bottom drawer. Banque de Genève, she dialed. She put it on speaker. Bonjour, Banque de Genève. A crisp voice answered. Yes, hello, Michelle stammered, trying to sound authoritative. This is Michelle Sterling. I am the daughter-in-law of Robert Sterling. He passed away recently. We need access to the accounts, specifically the large holdings. One moment, Mrs. Sterling. Silence. The kind of silence that stretches and snaps nerves. Brian was biting his thumbnail, pacing. Mrs. Sterling. The voice returned. It was colder now. I see the file for Monsieur Sterling. Could transfer the funds to our joint account in Portland. We need it immediately. I am afraid that is impossible, madame. What do you mean, impossible? Brian yelled at the phone. I am his son. I am the heir, monsieur, the banker said. The accounts were closed yesterday morning. The entire balance was liquidated and transferred to the Sterling Trust. Transferred? Michelle went pale. Transferred to who? Who controls the trust? The sole trustee, of course, the banker said. Mrs. Margaret Sterling. My mother. Brian shrieked. That's a lie. She's a senile old woman. She doesn't know how to use an ATM. The transfer was authorized and biometric verified. The banker said, the balance is zero. Goodbye. The line went dead. Michelle stood there, the phone slipping from her sweaty grip. It hit the hardwood floor, and the screen shattered. She has it, Michelle whispered. The old woman. She has everything. She stole it, Brian screamed. He grabbed a heavy bronze bookend and hurled it through the window. Glass rained down onto the patio. She manipulated him while he was sick. We have to find her. How? Michelle asked. We threw her out. We don't know where she went. The beach house, Brian said, his eyes lighting up with a desperate idea. The Cannon Beach House. It's the crown jewel. She'll be there. She's probably gloating right now. We go there, we break in, and we force her to sign it over. Is that legal? Michelle asked weakly. I don't care about legal. Brian grabbed his car keys. It's my money. Get in the car. The drive down the Oregon coast was a blur of speed and rage. Brian drove the white Tesla Model X like a weapon, weaving through traffic, honking at tourists. Michelle gripped the door handle, her knuckles white. She can't just take it, Brian muttered over and over. She's a seamstress. She makes quilts. She doesn't manage empires. Maybe we should call a lawyer, Michelle suggested. I am the lawyer, Brian yelled. Though he had never passed the bar exam, he just liked the sound of it. I know my rights. They reached the private road leading to the Cannon Beach Villa. It was a glass and steel masterpiece perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. It was worth $20 million easily. They pulled up to the massive stainless steel gate. Brian rolled down the window and punched the code into the keypad. 1985. His birth year. Beep. Access denied. What? He punched it again, harder. Beep. Access denied. She changed the code. He pounded on the steering wheel. Open the gate. Open it. Suddenly, a black SUV pulled up on the inside of the gate. It wasn't the usual private patrol. Two men in dark suits stepped out. They were built like linebackers, wearing earpieces. Brian jumped out of the car. Hey, you, open this gate. I am Brian Sterling. This is my father's house. One of the men walked to the gate. He didn't look intimidated. He looked bored. Mr. Sterling, he said calmly, please step away from the gate. I live here, Brian screamed. Well, I own it. My mother is inside, isn't she? Tell that old thief to come out here. Mrs. Sterling is not here, the guard said. And this property is owned by the Sterling Trust. Your name is not on the access list. In fact, you are specifically listed as barred. Brian gasped. I'm her son. You are trespassing, the guard said. He placed his hand on his holster, not drawing, just resting. A warning. We have been instructed to contact the sheriff if you do not leave immediately. Michelle got out of the car, looking terrified. Brian, let's go. These guys aren't messing around. That looks like private military. I'm not leaving. Brian grabbed the bars of the gate and shook them. Mom, I know you're in there. You can't hide from me. I'll sue you. I'll sue you into the ground. Mr. Sterling, the guard said, stepping closer to the bars. The sheriff is 3 minutes away. Do you want to be arrested in your morning suit? Brian froze. The reality of the steel bars, the gun, the cold eyes of the guard finally pierced his rage. He wasn't getting in. He let go of the bars. He turned to Michelle. His face was streaked with tears and sweat. She locked us out, he sobbed. She locked us out of everything. Let's go get dinner, Michelle said, trying to salvage some dignity. We need to think. We need a plan. Let's go to Canlis. We'll get a table, drink some wine, and figure out how to crush her. Brian sniffed, wiping his nose. Yes, a bottle of Screaming Eagle. I need a drink. Canlis was the most exclusive restaurant in Seattle. It was where the power players ate. Brian and Michelle walked in, trying to look like they owned the place despite their disheveled appearance. Table for Sterling. Brian barked at the maître d'. We usually sit by the window. The maître d' looked them over. He saw the red eyes, the wrinkled clothes, but he knew the name. Of course, Mr. Sterling. Right this way. They sat. They ordered the Wagyu beef, the truffle risotto, and the $1,200 bottle of Cabernet. They ate voraciously, fueling their anger. We'll hire the best firm in the city, Brian said, his mouth full of beef. We'll declare her incompetent. We'll say she has dementia. We'll say she coerced Dad. We'll destroy her, Michelle agreed, pouring more wine. She's just a seamstress. She doesn't have the stamina for a legal war. The bill came, $3,200. Michelle pulled out her black Centurion card. She slapped it on the tray with a flourish. Put a 20% tip on it. The waiter took the card. He walked away. Michelle leaned back, feeling a momentary return of her power. See, we're fine. Where's Sterling's? The waiter returned. He wasn't smiling. He was holding the card with 2 fingers like it was a dead fish. I'm sorry, ma'am, he said quietly. The card was declined. Michelle froze. Don't be ridiculous. That card has no limit. Run it again. I ran it 3 times, ma'am. The code is issuer, decline. Account frozen. Frozen. Michelle's voice rose. That old witch. She froze the supplemental cards. It's fine, Brian said, waving his hand dismissively. He pulled out his platinum visa. Use mine. The waiter took it. He came back 30 seconds later. Declined, sir. Insufficient funds. The restaurant went quiet. The diners at the nearby tables, tech CEOs, politicians, celebrities stopped talking. They were watching. That's impossible, Brian stammered. I have overdraft protection. It says, guarantor withdrawn, the waiter said. Sir, we need payment. We don't have cash, Brian whispered. The manager appeared. He was a tall, imposing man in an impeccable suit. Is there a problem here? Their cards are dead, the waiter said. I see, the manager said, his voice dripping with ice. Mr. Sterling, this bill must be settled now. We'll bring cash tomorrow, Michelle pleaded. You know us. We're here every week. Not anymore, the manager said. You have no credit here. You must leave collateral. Collateral, Brian squeaked. The watch, the manager said, pointing to Brian's wrist. The Rolex. Leave it. This is a $25,000 watch, Brian protested. You can't police or the watch, the manager asked. Brian trembled. He slowly unclasped the Rolex Submariner. He handed it over. The manager examined it, nodded, and slipped it into his pocket. Get out, the manager said, and don't come back until you can pay. They walked out of the restaurant, the walk of shame. Every eye was on them. Michelle held her head high, but her chin was quivering. Brian looked at the floor. They stumbled out onto the sidewalk. The valet stand was down the block, near the parking garage. I'm going to kill her, Michelle hissed. I am going to physically strangle her. We need to get home, Brian said. We need to regroup. They turned the corner into the parking structure, and they stopped. There were 2 tow trucks, massive dirty One was hooked up to Michelle's white Tesla. The other was lifting Brian's Model X into the air. No, Michelle screamed. She broke into a run, her heels clacking. Stop, that's my car. Put it down. A large man in a greased jumpsuit stepped in front of her. He held a clipboard. Michelle Sterling, he asked. Get away from my car, she yelled. Repossession order, the man said. Lease default. Guarantor pulled the plug at 4 p.m. They're going back to the dealer. You can't do this, Brian shouted, running up behind her. I am a regional sales manager. I need that car for work. Take it up with the bank, buddy, the repo man said. He turned to his partner. Lift it up. I said stop. Brian, fueled by the wine and the humiliation, did something stupid. He grabbed the repo man's shoulder and spun him around. Put it down now. The repo man didn't flinch. He was 6 feet 4 inches and moved refrigerators for a living. He looked at Brian like a bug. Don't touch me, the man growled. I'll touch you. Brian swung his fist. It was a weak, flailing punch. The repo man sidestepped it. He shoved Brian. Brian flew backward, tripping over a concrete parking block. He landed hard in a pile of wet cardboard and trash. Stay down, the repo man shouted. Sirens wailed. A police cruiser rolled into the garage. They had been called by the restaurant manager, just in case. The officers stepped out. Everything okay here? This guy attacked me, the repo man said, pointing at Brian, who was trying to wipe a banana peel off his suit jacket. I'm repoing the cars. It's a civil matter, the cop said. He looked at Brian. Did you swing at him? He's stealing my car, Brian whined. It's a repo, sir. If you swing again, you're going to jail for assault. Do we have a problem? Brian slumped. No problem. The tow trucks roared to life. Michelle and Brian stood in the exhaust fumes, watching their status symbols drive away. We have to walk, Michelle said, her voice hollow. We have to walk back to the apartment. I was in the penthouse, watching the city lights, when Patricia's phone rang. She listened for a moment, her face darkening. Understood. Stalled them. She hung up and looked at me. We have a complication. A serious one. What? I asked. Brian isn't just angry. He's desperate. He just filed an emergency ex parte motion with the probate court. He has a signed affidavit from a Dr. Chen claiming you are suffering from advanced dementia and are being manipulated by unnamed parties, meaning me, Dr. Chen. I asked. I've never met a Dr. Chen. Exactly. It's a forgery or a paid-for diagnosis, but the court takes these seriously. If the judge signs the temporary conservatorship order, the trust freezes all of it, the accounts, the properties. We lose control for at least 72 hours until we can prove your competency. By then, he could move back into the house and start looting. He's trying to checkmate me with a lie, I said, anger flaring. We have to kill this now. Patricia said, we can't wait for a hearing. We need to go to the emergency psychiatric evaluation center tonight. Voluntarily. I have to get tested. I slammed my hand on the table. I'm the victim here. It's the only way to stop the order. We get a clean bill of health from the state board, and his affidavit becomes evidence of fraud, but it means you have to spend the next 4 hours answering stupid questions from a state psychiatrist while Brian thinks he's winning. I grabbed my jacket. Let's go. The next 4 hours were a nightmare. I sat in a sterile white room at the county hospital while a tired psychiatrist asked me who the president was, asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens, and asked me to interpret proverbs. Patricia paced in the hallway, fighting on the phone with the court clerk. Meanwhile, Brian was undoubtedly celebrating. He probably thought the freeze was imminent. Finally, at 2 a.m., the doctor put down his pen. Mrs. Sterling, you are sharp as a tack. Your cognitive function is better than mine. I'm signing the clearance now. Patricia stormed in. The judge just received the clearance. He denied Brian's motion with prejudice. He also flagged his filing for potential perjury. We walked out of the hospital. I was exhausted, but the anger had crystallized into something harder. He tried to have me committed, I said softly. He tried to take my mind away. It was a false lead, Patricia said. He wasted his ammo. Now he has nothing left. No, I said. Now I take the roof. It was 3:30 a.m. when Brian and Michelle finally limped up to the door of their Belltown penthouse. Their feet were blistered. They smelled of sweat and exhaust. At least we have the apartment, Brian groaned. We can sleep, and tomorrow we'll find a new lawyer. He slid his key into the lock. It didn't turn. What now? He cried. He jiggled it. Nothing. Move. Michelle shoved him. She tried her key. It hit a solid block. She changed the locks, Michelle whispered. Then she saw it, a white envelope taped to the dark wood door at eye level. She ripped it down. Notice to vacate. Immediate possession. Tenant, Brian and Michelle. Sterling Raison. Default on lease agreement. Guarantor Sterling Trust has withdrawn security deposit and monthly payments. Status. Lockout in effect. Guarantor. Michelle read the word like it was poison. She was paying the rent this whole time. $32,000 a month, Brian said, sliding down the wall to sit on the floor. We never paid it. I thought you handled it with the investment dividends. I thought you paid it with your bonus, she screamed. They stared at each other. The illusion shattered. They were two children playing house in a mansion paid for by mother. Michelle turned to the door. She started pounding. Let me in, she shrieked. Thud, thud, thud. This is my home. You can't do this. I have rights. She pounded until her knuckles split. She kicked the wood until her heel broke. Michelle, stop, Brian said, grabbing her arm. The neighbors. I don't care about the neighbors, she wailed. But the door didn't budge. It was solid oak, paid for by me, that they ended up at the Sunset Inn, a dingy roadside motel off I-5. $49 a night. The room smelled of stale smoke and bleach. The carpet was sticky. Brian passed out on the lumpy bed, fully clothed. Michelle paced. She was a caged animal. My burner phone sat on the marble counter of the penthouse. I watched it light up. Incoming call, Brian. I let it ring. Incoming call, Brian. She called for an hour. Then the voicemails started. I picked up the phone. I didn't listen to them. I knew what they said. First rage. You thief. Give me my money. Then bargaining. Mom, let's talk. We can split it. Finally, desperation. Mom, please. We're hungry. 95 calls. I pressed the menu button. Delete all messages. Yes. A digital beep confirmed the erasure. I set the phone down. I had severed the limb to save the body. The next morning, Michelle was desperate. She had one card left to play. We go back to Seattle, she told a hungover Brian. We break in the jewelry. Robert had a safe in the floor of the closet. She doesn't know about it. There's $500,000 in diamonds there. We get the diamonds. We sell them. We hire a shark lawyer. They drove their rental car, a dented Ford Fiesta, back to the estate. They pulled into the driveway, planning to smash a window. But the driveway was blocked. A silver Bentley was parked sideways across the entrance. Leaning against it was Mr. Harrison. Mr. Harrison was the neighbor Michelle had mocked for years. Michelle called him the grump of the island because Mr. Harrison complained about their loud parties. "Move your car, you old fool," Michelle screamed, leaning out the window. Mr. Harrison didn't move. He smiled. It was a shark's smile. "I don't think so, dear," Mr. Harrison said. "I live here," Michelle yelled. "Not anymore." Mr. Harrison held up a small USB drive. "Michelle, do you remember calling the police on my granddaughter for playing music too loud?" "I do. What is that?" Michelle asked. "My security system was upgraded last month," Mr. Harrison said sweetly. 4K resolution. Drones. I have footage of you throwing Margaret's clothes on the lawn. I have audio of Brian telling her to sleep in the shed. It's remarkably clear. You were spying on us." "I was gathering evidence," Mr. Harrison said. "I sent a copy to Margaret this morning. She was very grateful. She's going to use it." "Give it to me." Michelle got out of the car. Mr. Harrison reached into his jacket and pulled out a canister of pepper spray. "Try it, honey." "I've been dying for an excuse." Michelle froze. She looked at the Bentley, the pepper spray, and the sheer malice in Mr. Harrison's eyes. "You're all against me," Michelle whispered. "We're just tired of you," Mr. Harrison corrected. "Now back that piece of junk up and get off the street before I call the cops." Brian and Michelle retreated to the motel. They were defeated. They had $200 left on a maxed-out credit card. Then, a knock on the door. A messenger stood there. Package for Michelle Sterling. It was a thick cream envelope, embossed with Patricia Hudson's law firm logo. Michelle tore it open. Her hands shook. "It's a lawsuit," Brian moaned. "She's suing us for damages." "No," Michelle said, reading the card. Her eyes widened. It's an invitation. You are cordially invited to a supplemental distribution hearing for the estate of Robert Sterling. Location: the Grand Hall, Portland Art Museum. Time: tonight, 7 p.m. Distribution. Brian asked, "What does that mean?" "It means she's caving," Michelle shouted. Jumping up, a manic laugh bubbled out of her throat. "Don't you see? She's scared. The false filing worked. She thinks we're going to drag this out, so she wants to settle. At a museum. She wants witnesses," Michelle said, pacing rapidly. "She wants to look generous. She's going to give us a few million to go away. It's a public payout." "We're rich again?" Brian asked, hope returning to his hollow eyes. "We will be," Michelle said, "but we can't go looking like this." She looked at her dirty dress. "We have $200. We're going to the costume rental shop. We need to look like we won." The Portland Art Museum was lit up like a supernova. Spotlights swept the sky. A red carpet stretched up the stairs. A taxi pulled up a yellow cab with a dented fender. Michelle and Brian stepped out. They looked like caricatures. Michelle wore a rented sequined gown that was a size too big, pinned at the back. Her hair was teased too high, brittle with hairspray. Brian wore a tuxedo that smelled of mothballs, the sleeves too long. They walked up the carpet. The photographers lowered their cameras. Who were these people? "Ignore them," Michelle hissed, clutching Brian's arm. "Keep walking." They reached the entrance. A security guard in a tuxedo stopped them. It was one of Patricia's people named Sterling, Michelle said haughtily. "We are the guests of honor." "Ah yes, follow me." He didn't lead them to a VIP box. He led them into the massive Grand Hall, packed with 1,000 of Oregon's elite. The governor was there. Tech billionaires, movie stars. The guard marched them right down the center aisle. Heads turned. Whispers started. "Is that Michelle? Look at her dress. Is that a rental? I heard they're broke." The guard stopped at the very front row. There were 2 folding chairs set up in the center, isolated from the rest of the tables. They were exposed. "Please sit here," the guard said. But Michelle looked around. She felt the eyes. This wasn't a settlement meeting. This was a stage. "Brian," she whispered, panic rising. "This feels wrong." "Sit down," Brian said, sweating. "Just take the check." The lights dimmed. The orchestra stopped playing. A spotlight hit the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice announced, "please welcome the president of the Sterling Foundation, Mrs. Margaret Sterling." Michelle gasped. I walked out. I wasn't wearing my seamstress apron. I was wearing a bespoke Armani gown. My silver hair was styled. I stood tall, my shoulders back. I looked like exactly what I was, a woman worth $50 million. The crowd applauded politely. I walked to the podium. I didn't look at the audience. I looked directly at the 2 people in the folding chairs. Brian's mouth hung open. He was staring at a ghost. He had never seen this woman before. He had only seen the mother he ignored. I adjusted the microphone. Thank you all for coming, I said. My voice boomed. My late husband Robert believed in charity. He also believed in justice. I paused. He believed that wealth is a tool. It can build or it can destroy. For 40 years, we hid our wealth to protect our family from the poison of greed. We failed. Michelle gripped her chair. She knew. My son, I said, pointing at him. The spotlight swung and hit him. He blinked, blinded. My son believes he is here tonight to receive an inheritance. I am, Brian shouted, standing up. It's my money. The crowd gasped. He believes he deserves it, I continued, talking over him. But let me show you why he does not. I pressed a button on the podium. The massive screen behind me flickered to life. The footage was crystal clear. It was the drone video from Mr. Harrison. The audience watched in high definition as Brian dragged my clothes out of the house. They watched him throw my dresses onto the grass. And then the audio played, amplified through the concert speakers. Sleep in the shed, old woman. That's about your speed. The gasp from the room sucked the air out of the hall. It was a sound of pure revulsion. The video cut to me walking away with my bag. I looked back at Michelle. She was frozen. Her face was a mask of horror. She wasn't just exposed. She was flayed. That is my son, I said quietly. And that is why tonight I am making a different kind of distribution. I held up a check. It was oversized, like a lottery winner's check. Margaret Sterling, sole trustee, hereby donate the entire Sterling estate, including the Mercer Island mansion, the Cannon Beach house, and liquid assets totaling $50 million to Seattle Children's Hospital. The crowd erupted a roar of applause. Michelle screamed, "No!" It was a primal sound, the sound of a soul breaking. "No, you can't. It's mine." She's lying. Michelle scrambled over the chairs. She lunged toward the stage. "Mom, don't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about the shed. Just give me the money." She hit the stairs. Patricia's security team materialized. They didn't be gentle this time. They grabbed her by the arms of her rented dress. "Get off me," she shrieked, kicking. Her shoe flew off and landed on the governor's table. "Brian, help me." Brian didn't move. He sat in his chair, staring at the screen where the image of the shed was frozen. He was catatonic. The guards dragged Michelle up the aisle. She was screaming obscenities, begging, cursing. "You old witch, I hope you die. It's mine." The doors swung open, and they tossed her out into the night. I stood on the stage, listening to the applause wash over me. It wasn't a triumph of joy. It was a triumph of order. The balance had been restored. I looked down at Brian. A guard tapped him on the shoulder. "Time to go, sir." Brian stood up like a robot. He walked out, leaving his wife's shoe behind. 1 year later, the sun was setting over the Pacific Ocean. I sat on the deck of the Cannon Beach house. The air smelled of charcoal and salt. I wasn't alone. Mr. Harrison was sitting at the patio table, drinking a margarita. Patricia was manning the grill, wearing a ridiculous apron that said, "Lawyer by day, chef by night." A dozen of my old sewing circle friends were in the pool, laughing. This house, once a cold museum of wealth, was alive. It was warm. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Not the burner phone. I had thrown that into the sea the night of the gala. A new iPhone. I looked at the screen. A text from an unknown number. "Mom, I got a job at a coffee shop in Tacoma. It's hard. My feet hurt." I stared at the words. "I'm sorry." A second text came through. I looked at the ocean. He was finally learning. He was finally finding the water. I typed one word back. "Good." I put the phone away. "Margaret," Mr. Harrison yelled, "are you going to play cards or just stare at the sunset?" "I'm coming," I said. I walked back to the table, sat down, and picked up my hand. For the first time in 45 years, I wasn't hiding anything. I was just Margaret, and that was enough.